October 5th, 1943, 18,000 feet above the Pacific. Flight Warrant Officer Isamu Tanaka banked his Mitsubishi A650 into position. His hands moved across the controls with the confidence of 9 confirmed victories. Through the crystal-clear canopy, the morning sun painted the ocean below in shades of cobalt and silver. The air at this altitude was thin cold, clean. Below him, an American fighter climbed toward his formation. Tanaka studied the approaching silhouette, fat fuselage, bulky profile, those unmistakable stubby wings and greenhouse canopy. He knew this aircraft. He had destroyed this aircraft. Time and again. The Grumman F4F Wildcat, the same type he had sent spiraling into the sea with his signature tactic. A thin smile crossed his face. He keyed his radio transmitter. The static crackled in his headset before his voice cut through. Another Wildcat coming up to die. I will take this one myself. His wingman acknowledged. 2 clicks. Professional. Brief. Tanaka adjusted his oxygen mask and checked his instruments. Fuel sufficient, ammunition full, engine temperature nominal. The Nakajima Sakai 12 radial. Engine 14 cylinders producing 130 horsepower, hummed with mechanical perfection. This power plant had carried him through 2 years of war, through the chaos of Coral Sea, through the hell of Guadalcanal, through 9 victories that had made him one of the most experienced pilots still flying from Wake Island. He ran the calculations instinctively. Target bearing 340 degrees, range 2.3 miles, closure rate approximately 180 miles per hour. Time to engagement 46 seconds. Plenty of time. What the 9 victory ace didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that he wasn't looking at a Wildcat. The aircraft climbing toward him was something entirely new. A monster that wore the Wildcat's face but carried the heart of a killer. And in exactly 60 seconds, Isamu Tanaka would be dead. In the cockpit of that approaching fighter sat Ensign Brendan Ashford, 22 years old, second combat mission. His hands gripped the control stick of his brand-new F6F Hellcat with the white-knuckle intensity of a man who knew he wasn't ready for this. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine roared in front of him. 18 cylinders, 2 rows, 2,000 horsepower. The most powerful radial engine ever installed in a single-seat fighter. The vibration traveled through the airframe, through the stick, into his bones. Ashford's breathing came fast inside his oxygen mask. His roommate had died 3 weeks ago, shot down over Tarawa in a Wildcat, 23 years old. They had found pieces of the aircraft floating in the lagoon. Not much else. The memory made his hands shake, but his instructor's voice echoed in his mind, cutting through the fear. If a Zero tries to outclimb you, follow him up. The Hellcat will surprise him every time. Ashford didn't believe it. Not really. How could this big heavy fighter match the legendary Zero? The Japanese aircraft was supposed to be untouchable in a climb. Everyone said so. The Zero could dance. The Zero could soar. The Zero owned the vertical. But orders were orders. He pushed the throttle forward. The R2800 responded with a surge of power that pressed him back into his seat. The 3-bladed Hamilton standard propeller, 13 feet in diameter, bit into the thin air with authority that seemed impossible at this altitude. Below him, the Zero began its move. Isamu Tanaka initiated his killing maneuver with the precision of a surgeon, the vertical climbing loop, the tactic that had destroyed so many Wildcats. So devastatingly simple. Pull the Zero into a steep vertical climb. Watch the heavier American fighter stall and fall away like a wounded bird. Roll over at the apex. Dive down on the helpless victim. End it with a 2-second burst from the 20mm cannon. It had worked 9 times before. His first victory had come at Coral Sea in May 1942. A Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber, slow and vulnerable after its attack run. Tanaka had climbed beneath it, pulled vertical, and fired a 3-second burst that tore the aircraft apart. The 2-man crew never had a chance. His second and third kills came during the defense of Rabaul, 2 P-39 Airacobras attempting to strafe the harbor. He had used the same tactic. Vertical climb, stall them out, roll over, kill shot. Both American pilots bailed out. One made it to shore, the other didn't. Victories 4 through 7 came over Guadalcanal. The desperate months when Japanese and American forces fought for control of a worthless island that somehow meant everything. F4F Wildcats mostly. Good pilots, brave men, wrong aircraft. They couldn't climb with him, couldn't escape, couldn't survive. His 8th kill was a B-17 bomber that had strayed from its formation. 4 engines, 10 machine guns, heavy armor. None of it mattered when Tanaka positioned himself in the bomber's blind spot and methodically destroyed engine after engine until the Flying Fortress wasn't flying anymore. His ninth victory had come just 2 weeks ago. Another Wildcat, another American pilot who learned too late that the Zero owned the vertical, another family receiving a telegram. The mathematics were perfect. The Wildcat's Pratt & Whitney R1830 engine produced only 200 horsepower. Against the Zero's lighter airframe and superior power-to-weight ratio, there was no contest. Wildcat stalled at 12,000 feet while trying to follow. Zeros kept climbing. The law of physics, the law of war. Tanaka's tactic was based on 2 years of perfect success. He pulled back on the stick. The Zero responded instantly, nose pitching up toward vertical. The acceleration forces pushed him down into his seat. His vision narrowed slightly as blood drained from his head. He had learned to love this sensation. The moment when the aircraft became an extension of his will. When man and machine merged into a single weapon, the ocean fell away beneath him. The sky opened above. He waited for the American fighter to stall, to tumble, to fall. It didn't. The Hellcat followed him up. Ashford's world had become vertical. The ocean that had been below was now behind. The sky that had been above was now ahead. His inner ear screamed in confusion. His hands moved on instinct, keeping the nose pointed at the climbing, Zero keeping the throttle firewalled, keeping the aircraft in the narrow band between maximum climb and stall. The R2800 Double Wasp maintained full power. The two-stage, two-speed supercharger forced air into the cylinders with mechanical violence, compensating for the thinning atmosphere. Where the Wildcat would have been gasping, choking, dying, the Hellcat breathed deep and climbed. 12,000 feet. Ashford stayed with him. 13,000 feet. Still there. 14,000 feet. The Hellcat's rate of climb was 2,600 feet per minute at sea level. But above 14,000 feet, something remarkable happened. The supercharger's second stage kicked in with a surge of power. The American fighter didn't just match the Zero's performance, it exceeded it. 15,000 feet. Ashford could see the Zero clearly now. Less than 300 yards. The distinctive profile, the red circles on the wings catching the morning light, the exhaust stacks trailing wisps of smoke. Beautiful aircraft. Deadly aircraft. His aircraft. For the first time in his combat career, for the first time in 2 years of war, Isamu Tanaka felt something close to panic. The American was still there. Still climbing, still gaining. This wasn't supposed to happen. This couldn't happen. Wildcats fell away. Wildcats stalled. Wildcats died. That was the order of things. That was the law. But this wasn't a Wildcat. Tanaka reached the apex of his loop at 16,000 feet, airspeed bleeding off. Aircraft shuddering on the edge of stall, stick going mushy in his hands. He found himself in the most vulnerable position imaginable. Slow, high, exposed. With an enemy fighter that shouldn't exist matching his every move. His mind raced through the possibilities. New engine supercharger modification. Had the Americans finally learned to build a real fighter? The questions died as he saw the Americans' wing roots light up with muzzle flashes. Ashford had been briefed on this exact scenario during his training at Naval Air Station, Jacksonville. His instructor had been a veteran of Midway, a man who had survived when so many hadn't, a man who had looked Ashford in the eye and said words that now seemed prophetic. If a Zero tries to outclimb you, follow him up. Get to 16,000 feet. Watch him hang there like a target on a wire. Then squeeze the trigger. The Hellcat won't let you down. At 16,000 feet with both aircraft nearly stalled at the top of the vertical climb, Brendan Ashford squeezed the trigger. 6 M2 Browning 50 caliber machine guns opened fire as one. The convergence point had been set at 300 yards. The armorer who had calibrated the guns was a 19-year-old kid from Tennessee who took his job seriously. He had adjusted each weapon with precision, creating a cone of destruction where all 6 streams of fire intersected in a space roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything caught in that zone faced 80 half-inch projectiles per second. Each round weighed half an ounce. Each traveled at 2,900 feet per second. Armor-piercing incendiary, designed to punch through metal and ignite fuel. The Zero's unarmored fuselage stood no chance. Tanaka's aircraft came apart. The fuel tank located directly behind the pilot with no protection, no self-sealing bladder, no armor plate exploded in a fireball that could be seen for 10 miles. The Zero had achieved its phenomenal range and agility through weight reduction. Savage weight reduction. Every unnecessary pound stripped away in pursuit of performance, including the pounds that would have kept Isamu Tanaka alive. The transformation from fighting machine to burning debris took 2.8 seconds. Tanaka felt the impact, felt the heat, felt his aircraft disintegrate around him. In his final moment, his last thought was not of war or victory or the emperor. It was of two faces. His wife, Akiko, his daughter, Yuki, 3 years old, black hair, bright eyes. Akiko, Yuki, then nothing. Brendan Ashford broke right, checking his 6 o'clock. Training, instinct, never assume, never relax. Always another zero, always another threat. But the sky was empty, just smoke, just falling debris, just the ocean far below waiting to swallow the evidence. His radio erupted with voices. Splash 10 Ashford got one. Confirm kill 0 down. Jesus Christ, did you see that? Ashford's hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, from adrenaline, from the realization of what had just happened. He had just killed a man, shot him out of the sky, burned him alive. A man who probably had a family, a life, dreams, all gone in less than 3 seconds. And he felt, what relief, triumph, shame, pride, horror, all of it at once. He keyed his microphone. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, distant. Splash confirmed, returning to station. Professional, calm, the voice of a fighter pilot. Inside, he was screaming. But within 60 seconds, that feeling would be buried, hidden beneath the necessities of survival. The immediate need to rejoin his formation, to check his fuel, to scan for more enemies, to do his job. The processing would come later. In the dark, in the quiet, when there was nothing to distract him from what he had become. A killer 6 months earlier. April 1942. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, Bethpage, Long Island, New York. Commander Hawthorne Calloway walked through the factory doors with the bearing of a man on a mission. 32 years old, Medal of Honor recipient, face that had aged a decade in 6 months of war. He carried a leather briefcase in his left hand. His right hand was wrapped in bandages. Burns from a Wildcat that had caught fire during a carrier landing. He had been lucky. The pilot behind him had not been. William Schwendler Grumman's chief engineer met him in the conference room. 45 years old, glasses, tired eyes, the eyes of a man who knew his aircraft were getting pilots killed and didn't know how to fix it. Calloway didn't waste time on pleasantries. He opened the briefcase and laid out the contents across the polished oak table. Gun camera footage, combat reports, casualty lists, photographs. 12 pilots, all dead, all flying Wildcats against Zeros. Mr. Schwendler, your Wildcat is getting my boys killed. The words hit like hammer blows. Blunt, brutal, true. The Zero outclimbs us, outturns us, outranges us. We're fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. I've watched good men die because they couldn't keep up, because they couldn't escape, because they trusted an aircraft that couldn't bring them home. Schwendler had heard similar complaints before, but never delivered with such cold fury, never backed by so much blood. We're working on improvements, Commander. The F6F project is, I don't want improvements. Calloway's voice dropped to a whisper, somehow more terrifying than shouting. I want a fighter that matches the Zero. I want a fighter that protects my pilots. I want a fighter that kills Japanese aircraft faster than they can build them. Can you give me that? Schwendler met his eyes. Long moment, then nodded. Yes, but I need you to tell me everything. Every weakness, every failure, every lesson you've learned in blood. Calloway pulled out more documents. Combat reports from Pearl Harbor, from Wake Island, from the disaster at the Philippines, from the desperate defense of Australia, the catalog of American failure in the Pacific. The numbers were damning. At Wake Island in December 1941, 12 F4F Wildcats had faced overwhelming Japanese forces. 4 survived. At the Philippines, P-40 Warhawks and P-35s were destroyed on the ground or shot from the sky. At Java Sea, at Coral Sea, at the desperate defense of Port Moresby, American fighters were outmatched. The kill ratios told the story. Early war Zeros were destroying American aircraft at rates of 3 to 1, 4 to 1, sometimes worse. American pilots were brave. They were skilled. They were dying because their aircraft couldn't compete. But Calloway also brought something unexpected. Intelligence reports on a Zero that had crashed in the Aleutian Islands and been recovered intact. American engineers had tested the captured aircraft at Naval Air Station North Island. They had discovered its strengths and its fatal weaknesses. The Zero achieves its performance through weight reduction, Calloway explained, spreading photographs across the table. Extreme weight reduction, no armor protection for the pilot, No self-sealing fuel tanks. The airframe is so lightly built that a few 50 caliber hits can tear it apart. He pointed to technical drawings, measurements, stress analysis. The Zero's entire airframe weighed only 704 pounds empty. The engine added another 200 pounds. Total operational weight approximately 300 pounds. They built a fighter that can dance, but it bleeds at first touch. One burst, one good burst. That's all it takes. The Zero burns like gasoline-soaked paper. Schwendler studied the reports, his mind already working through the implications, through the possibilities. So we don't try to outturn it. No. We don't try to match its range. No. We match its climb, add overwhelming firepower, add armor, accept the weight penalty. Callaway leaned forward. Build me a fighter that brings pilots home alive. Build me a fighter that wins. I don't care if it's not the most elegant aircraft ever designed. I care if it works. Schwendler was already sketching on a notepad. Rough lines, quick calculations, the seed of something new. The F6F prototype is nearly complete, powered by a Wright R2600 Cyclone, 700 horsepower. Good aircraft, but if we're going for climb rate and survivability, he did math in his head. Weight, power, performance. We need more power. The Pratt & Whitney R2800. Same engine they're putting into the Corsair and the P47, 2,000 horsepower. We lose some efficiency, we gain everything else. How long? To modify the second prototype 6 weeks, maybe 8. You have 4. Schwendler looked up sharply, but he saw Callaway's face. Saw the urgency, saw the desperation, saw the weight of dead pilots haunting every word. We'll have it ready in 4. They did. The work consumed Grumman's engineering staff. 18-hour days, 7-day weeks. The R2800 engine was larger than the R2600, heavier, required different mounting systems, different cooling arrangements, different everything. Bob Hall, the project engineer, practically lived at the factory. His team redesigned the engine mount, strengthened the forward fuselage, recalculated weight and balance, modified the cowling, adjusted the center of gravity. The changes rippled through the entire airframe. New engine meant new propeller. New propeller meant different torque characteristics. Different torque meant adjusted control surfaces. Each modification created 3 more problems that needed solving, but they solved them. The F6F3, powered by the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, first flew on July 30th, 1942. Just 34 days after the original F6F1, an almost impossible timeline, achieved through 18-hour workdays and the knowledge that every delayed week meant more Wildcat pilots dying. Test pilot Selden Converse brought the aircraft back after that first flight with an assessment that would echo through naval aviation history. Gentlemen, this airplane is perfect. Not good, not promising, not adequate, perfect. Grumman engineer Bob Hall, who had worked himself to exhaustion getting the prototype ready later, reflected on that extraordinary moment. It may have been the only fighter that was completely right from the start. Most aircraft need months of testing, years of modifications, endless refinements. The Hellcat. We rolled out the first one and it was right. Almost didn't need a prototype phase. Just start building them. The R2800 Double Wasp was an engineering masterpiece that perfectly matched the Hellcat's mission requirements. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows. Each cylinder displaced 155.4 cubic inches. Total displacement, 804 cubic inches. Nearly 46 liters, air-cooled radial configuration that could absorb tremendous battle damage without catastrophic failure. Enemy bullets could punch through cooling fins, crack cylinder heads, even destroy entire cylinders. The engine kept running, kept producing power, kept bringing pilots home. The 2-stage 2-speed supercharger maintained power at altitude. The first stage compressed incoming air. The second stage compressed it further. At sea level, the engine produced 2,000 horsepower. At 17,000 feet, with both supercharger stages engaged, it still produced 1,600 horsepower. The Wildcat's R1830 engine was producing less than 800 horsepower at that altitude. The difference was life and death. Maximum output 2,000 horsepower at 2,700 RPM, rising to 2,200 horsepower with water injection in later F6F5 variants. Enough power to haul 15 pounds of fighter into vertical climbs that defied belief. The engine weighed 260 pounds, more than twice the Zero's power plant, but it delivered more than twice the power with 3 times the reliability. But raw power was only part of the equation. The Hellcat's design incorporated features specifically intended to keep pilots alive. Lessons learned from thousands of combat reports, from hundreds of pilot testimonies, from the bitter experience of watching good men die in aircraft that couldn't protect them. The cockpit sat behind 212 pounds of armor plate, 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot's seat, strong enough to stop 20-millimeter cannon shells at typical combat ranges. Half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, armor deflection plates around the oil tank and oil cooler, additional armor protecting the ammunition bays from sympathetic detonation. A 250-gallon self-sealing fuel tank in the fuselage that could take multiple hits and not ignite, not leak, not turn the aircraft into a flying bomb. The self-sealing bladder was made of vulcanized rubber with layers that swelled when exposed to fuel, automatically sealing bullet holes. Japanese pilots would put 20 or 30 rounds into a Hellcat's fuel tank and watch in frustration as the American fighter flew away. Leaking fuel, yes, but not burning, not exploding, still flying. The armament was overwhelming. 6 M2 Browning 50 caliber machine guns, 3 mounted in each wing, 400 rounds per gun, total ammunition load 2 to 400 rounds. 600 pounds of ammunition carrying out enough kinetic energy to destroy any aircraft in the Japanese inventory. The guns were positioned to create a convergence zone at 300 yards where all 6 weapons fire intersected in a space roughly 6 feet in diameter. The ballistics were calculated precisely. Each gun fired at a rate of 800 rounds per minute. 6 guns combined, 4 to 800 rounds per minute, 80 rounds per second. Each round a half-inch diameter projectile weighing 1.7 ounces, traveling at 2,900 feet per second, carrying 13 and 500 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. The mathematics were brutal. A 1-second burst delivered 80 projectiles carrying over 1 million foot-pounds of combined energy into a target area smaller than a dining table. Anything caught in that zone didn't survive. Couldn't survive. The Zero's entire airframe weighed only 3,700 pounds empty. The Hellcat could pump 600 pounds of projectiles into a target in less than 10 seconds of sustained fire. The difference between a fighter and wreckage was measured in heartbeats. The Hellcat's size shocked pilots accustomed to the compact Wildcat. Empty weight, 238 pounds. Loaded weight, 598 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight with external stores, 415 pounds. Nearly 3 times the weight of a Zero. The wing area measured 334 square feet. Wingspan 42 feet 10 inches. Length 33 feet 7 inches. Height 13 feet 1 inch. It looked like a fighter that had been built by men who believed in overkill. Because they did. Performance specifications told the story. Maximum speed 380 miles per hour at 23,000 feet. Service ceiling 37,300 feet. Combat range 9 to 45 miles with external fuel tanks. Rate of climb 2,600 feet per minute at sea level, increasing with altitude and as the supercharger became more effective. The numbers didn't lie, but they also didn't capture what the aircraft meant, what it represented. The Hellcat was industrial revenge. American engineers had studied Japanese excellence and built something to destroy it. They had taken the Zero's greatest strength and matched it. Then they had added everything the Zero couldn't have: protection, firepower, durability, the ability to absorb punishment and keep fighting. The Zero was a samurai sword, beautiful, deadly, fragile. The Hellcat was a sledgehammer, heavy, brutal, unstoppable. Production began with an urgency born of desperation. Grumman built an entirely new facility, Plant Number 3, Bethpage, Long Island. The building covered over 1 million square feet. The structural steel for the building came partially from scrapping New York's 2nd Avenue elevated railway. Urban infrastructure transformed into weapons of war, the American way. Production began even before the building was completed. Workers assembled aircraft while construction crews built walls around them. The sound of riveting mixed with the sound of hammering, Hellcats taking shape while the factory itself took shape. The scene was surreal. Organized chaos. But it worked. The workforce grew rapidly. By late 1943, over 20,000 workers labored in Plant Number 3. Many had never worked in aircraft manufacturing before Pearl Harbor. Farmers, store clerks, housewives, teachers, all retrained, all contributing, all part of the war machine. Women made up a significant portion of the workforce. Rosie the Riveter wasn't just a propaganda poster. She was thousands of real women taking jobs left vacant by men gone to fight, building the weapons their husbands and sons and brothers would fly. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Women building tools of death while praying for peace. The first production F6F flew on October 3, 1942, serial number 04775. It was assigned to VF9 for operational testing. Then production accelerated with American industrial ferocity. 12 aircraft in the last quarter of 1942, 128 in the first quarter of 1943, 130 in April 1943 alone, 200 in May, 250 in June. By peak production in March 1945, Grumman would complete one Hellcat every 62 minutes. Around the clock, day and night, an assembly line that never stopped feeding the war machine. The production numbers were staggering. By war's end, Grumman would manufacture 12 275 Hellcats in just over 2 years. Approximately 17 aircraft per day at peak production. More fighters than Japan could produce in 6 months. The industrial disparity was crushing. Quality control was rigorous. Every aircraft was tested, every system checked, every rivet inspected. The rejection rate was less than 1%. Grumman's reputation for quality wasn't just marketing, it was gospel. They built 12 275 Hellcats in just over 2 years, an industrial achievement that matched the aircraft's combat prowess. Fighting Squadron 9 received the first operational Hellcats in January 1943. Ensign Brendan Ashford stood on the flight deck of USS Essex and stared at his assigned aircraft. Bureau number 08815, fresh from the factory. Smelling of paint and hydraulic fluid and new rubber. The number 13 painted on the fuselage in white. Unlucky number. He didn't care. The Hellcat dwarfed the Wildcats parked nearby. Made them look like toys. Children's aircraft. He walked around it slowly, taking in the details. The massive cowling housing the R-2800, the broad wings heavy with firepower, the sturdy landing gear that looked like it could handle anything. His hand touched the wing root. Cool metal, solid, real. She's a beast, isn't she? Ashford turned. Commander Sterling Wade, VF9's commanding officer. Veteran of Coral Sea and Midway, 26 years old, already ancient in carrier pilot years. He had 7 confirmed kills, 3 probable. 2 aircraft shot out from under him. Both times he survived. Both times he climbed back into another fighter and went back up. Yes, sir. Does she fly as good as she looks? Wade smiled, tired smile, but genuine. Better. Wildcat was a fighter that fought with guts and determination. This, he patted the Hellcat's fuselage with something close to affection. This is a fighter that fights with physics and firepower. The Zero won't know what hit it. Have you flown her yet, sir? Yesterday. Took her up to 30,000 feet. Climbs like an express elevator. Dives like a brick with wings. Turns like a Mack truck. But here's the thing, Ashford. You don't need to turn with a Zero. You climb above it, you dive on it, you shoot it, you climb away. The Zero can't follow you up, can't catch you in a dive, can't hurt you if it hits you. Wade's expression grew serious. Your roommate, Thompson, good kid. He died because the Wildcat couldn't bring him home. Took 3 20mm rounds in the fuel tank. Burned before he could bail out. We found his life raft, empty. This aircraft, Wade pointed at the Hellcat, those 20mm rounds would have hit the self-sealing tank, would have punched through, would have sealed automatically. Thompson would have landed safely, would be drinking coffee with us right now. He paused. This aircraft will bring you home. Trust it. Fly it like they taught you. Don't try to dogfight. Don't try to be fancy. Just use the altitude. Use the speed. Use those 650s. And Ashford, when you get your first kill, don't apologize for it. Don't feel guilty. The man you kill is trying to kill you. He'd burn your aircraft and laugh while doing it. This is war. We didn't start it, but by God, we're going to finish it. Yes, sir. Wade walked away, leaving Ashford alone with his new fighter. Ashford climbed into the cockpit, settled into the seat. The armor plate behind him felt reassuring, substantial, like sitting in a bank vault instead of an airplane. The instrument panel was familiar from training. Throttle quadrant on the left, mixture control, propeller pitch, supercharger selector, landing gear handle, flap lever, gun sight directly in front, guarded trigger on the stick. He sat there for a long time, hands on the controls, eyes closed, trying to imagine what combat would feel like, trying to prepare himself for the moment when training became reality. When the target in his gun sight wasn't a sleeve towed by another aircraft. When the bullets going out were answered by bullets coming in. He couldn't imagine it. No one could. Not until it happened. The first familiarization flight came 3 days later. January 18th, 1943. Clear skies, calm seas, perfect conditions for learning a new aircraft. Ashford strapped into bureau number 08A5 with a checklist in his lap and nervousness in his chest. The plane captain, a kid from Iowa, barely 19 years old, helped him with the shoulder harness, showed him the emergency canopy release, pointed out the CO2 bottle for the pneumatic system. "She's a good bird, sir." Maintenance crew went over her 3 times. "Everything's perfect." "Thank you." "Bring her back safe, sir. We'll be waiting." The startup procedure was complex. Master switch on, fuel selector to main tank, mixture rich, propeller full forward, throttle cracked and open 1 inch, primer pump 3 strokes, magnetos on. Starter engage. The R2800 coughed, sputtered, caught. 18 cylinders firing in sequence created a sound like controlled thunder. The entire aircraft shook. Smoke poured from the exhaust stacks. The smell of burning oil and high-octane fuel filled the air. Ashford let the engine warm up. Watch the oil temperature climb. Watch the oil pressure stabilize. Check the magnetos. Both firing. Check the propeller. Cycled through all positions. Everything green. He taxied to the catapult. The deck crew positioned him, hooked up the bridle, gave him the tension signal. Ashford ran through the takeoff checklist. Flaps up. Tail wheel locked. Canopy closed. Mixture rich. Propeller full forward. Throttle to full power. The R2800 roared. The aircraft strained against the holdback. The catapult officer checked everything. Gave the launch signal. The catapult fired 0 to 90 miles per hour in 2.3 seconds. The acceleration was violent, brutal. Ashford's head snapped back against the headrest. His vision grayed. Then he was airborne. Flying, the ocean dropping away beneath him. The carrier shrinking behind him. He was alive. He was flying. He was in control of the most powerful fighter aircraft in the world. The feeling was indescribable. For the next 40 minutes, Ashford explored what the Hellcat could do, climbed it to 25,000 feet, marveled at how the aircraft just kept climbing. No strain, no struggle, just smooth, steady ascent. Tried some turns. The Hellcat turned respectably. Not like a zero, but well enough. Tried a pushed over into a 60-degree dive and watched the airspeed indicator climb past 400 miles per hour. The aircraft was rock solid. No flutter, no vibration, just speed. He tried a stall, pulled back on the stick until the airspeed bled off. The stall came gentle, docile. The nose dropped. Recovery was immediate. No spin, no drama. Then he did what he really wanted to try. A vertical climb. At 15,000 feet, Ashford pushed the throttle to the firewall, pulled the stick back hard. The Hellcat's nose pitched up. Through 45 degrees, through 60 degrees, through odd degrees, past vertical. The aircraft climbed like an elevator. 600 feet per minute, 800 feet per minute. Still climbing, still accelerating. He kept it going until 22,000 feet. Then pushed over, grinning inside his oxygen mask, thinking about zeros, thinking about the vertical loop they loved, thinking about how surprised they would be. He returned to Essex 43 minutes after launch. The landing was uneventful, caught the 3-wire, folded the wings, taxied to parking, shut down the engine. The plane captain was waiting. "How'd she do, sir?" "Perfect, absolutely perfect." And she was. August 30th, 1943. The briefing room aboard USS Essex. Commander Sterling Wade stood before a map of the Central Pacific. Red pins marked Japanese-held islands. Blue pins marked American positions. The gap between them was vast. Marcus Island lay isolated 1,000 miles southeast of Tokyo, a worthless piece of coral and rock that had suddenly become vitally important because it had a runway. "Gentlemen, tomorrow morning we hit Marcus Island. This will be the combat debut of the F6F Hellcat. The entire Pacific Fleet will be watching. Naval Air will be watching. Washington will be watching. We need to make a statement." 24 pilots sat in folding chairs. Brendan Ashford was among them. 7 months of training since receiving his Hellcat. 7 months of familiarization flights, gunnery practice, formation flying, tactics, but no combat. Tomorrow that would change. Intelligence reports 8 to 12 Japanese bombers on the ground. Minimal air defenses. "This is a strafing mission. We go in at dawn, destroy everything, get out, simple." Wade looked directly at Ashford. "Ashford, you'll fly wing on me. Stay tight, follow my lead. Don't try to be a hero, just do your job." "Yes, sir." The briefing continued. Weather, fuel calculations, communications protocols, emergency procedures, everything pilots needed to know to survive. Ashford took notes, asked no questions, tried to ignore the knot in his stomach. After the briefing, he returned to his stateroom, couldn't sleep, lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, thinking about Thompson, his roommate, his friend, dead over Tarawa, 23 years old. Body never recovered, just a telegram to his parents. We regret to inform you. Ashford didn't want his parents receiving that telegram. He wanted to survive tomorrow, wanted to do his job, wanted to come home. The Hellcat would make that possible. He had to believe that, had to trust the aircraft, had to trust his training, had to trust himself. August 31st, 1943, so for 15 hours. The flight deck was chaos, ordered caisson, aircraft being positioned, engines starting, deck crew running between airplanes with practice precision, the catapult crew preparing for launch, the arresting gear crew standing by for recovery. Ashford sat in bureau number 0815. Strapped in, checklist complete, engine running smooth, all gauges green, ready. His hands weren't shaking. That surprised him. He thought they would be, thought he would be terrified. Instead, he felt calm, focused, ready. Commander Wade launched first. Catapult shot him into the darkness. 1 second on deck, next second airborne, gone. Ashford was next. The deck crew positioned him, hooked up the bridle, gave the tension signal. Ashford ran through his final checks. Everything perfect. He saluted the catapult officer, braced himself. The catapult fired. The acceleration drove him back into his seat. Gray vision, crushing weight, then release. Airborne, flying, the carrier falling away behind him, the darkness all around, nothing but engine sound and instrument glow and the sense of speed. He formed up on Wade, found his position off the commander's right wing, held it. Other Hellcats joined. 16 aircraft, all new, all untested in combat, all carrying pilots who wanted to prove the Hellcat was everything promised. They flew toward Marcus Island at 8,000 feet. The sun rose behind them, painted the ocean gold and orange and red. Beautiful morning, perfect conditions for killing. At 05:45 hours, Marcus Island appeared on the horizon, small, insignificant, but it had a runway. It had aircraft. It had to be destroyed. This is Wade. Start your attack runs. Stay tight. Watch for ground fire. Good hunting. The Hellcats dove toward the island. Ashford followed Wade down. Airspeed building, 250 knots, 280 knots, 310 knots. The island growing larger. The runway becoming visible. Aircraft parked along the taxiway. 8 bombers, maybe 10, sitting ducks. Wade opened fire at 1,500 feet. 650 caliber machine guns creating streams of destruction. Tracers arcing down, impacting the first bomber. Sparks, explosions, fire. Ashford pressed his trigger. The Hellcat shuddered. The sound was incredible, like tearing metal, like thunder contained in a box. 6 guns firing simultaneously created a noise that overwhelmed everything. The vibration traveled through the entire airframe, through his hands, his chest, his teeth. His tracers walked across the second bomber. Japanese twin-engine aircraft. Couldn't identify the type. Didn't matter. He kept his trigger pressed. Watched his rounds tear through the fuselage, through the wings, through the engines. The bomber exploded. Not caught fire, not burned. Exploded. Disintegrated in a fireball that rose 200 feet. Pieces spinning through the air. Metal rain falling across the runway. Ashford pulled up hard. G-forces crushing him. Vision narrowing. Stick back. Throttle forward. Climbing away from the island. Away from the ground fire starting to reach up. Away from the danger, he rejoined Wade at 5,000 feet. Checked his 6. Clear. Checked his instruments. All normal. Ammunition counter showed 100 rounds remaining. He had fired 300 rounds. Destroyed 1 bomber. Used 1/8 of his ammunition load to completely eliminate an enemy aircraft. The mathematics were brutal, efficient, deadly. 3 more attack runs followed. Each time diving, firing, destroying, climbing away. By 0630 hours, every Japanese bomber on Marcus Island was burning wreckage. The fuel dumps were exploding. The hangars were collapsing. The runway was cratered. Mission accomplished. The Hellcats reformed, headed back to Essex. Not a single American aircraft damaged. Not a single pilot scratched. Complete success. Ashford landed aboard Essex at 07:15 hours. Shut down, climbed out. The plane captain was grinning. "How'd she do, sir?" "She did great. Not a single problem." "Get any kills, sir?" "One bomber, on the ground, but yeah, I got one." It felt anticlimactic. He had expected combat to be terrifying. Life or death. Instead, it had been professional, technical, almost routine. Attack, destroy, return, simple. But that had been against targets on the ground, against aircraft that couldn't fight back. Real combat would be different. Real combat was coming. October 4th, 1943, evening briefing aboard USS Essex. The carrier was part of Task Force 14. 6 carriers, hundreds of aircraft, steaming toward Wake Island. Intelligence reported heavy Japanese fighter presence, maybe 50 Zeros based there. This wouldn't be a strafing mission. This would be air-to-air combat, the real test. Commander Wade stood before his pilots, 24 Hellcat pilots, all experienced now, all veterans of Marcus Island and a dozen other strikes, but none had fought Zeros yet. That was about to change. "Gentlemen, tomorrow we hit Wake Island. Expect heavy opposition, 50+ Zeros. They'll try to engage us over the island. Our job is to destroy them." Wade pointed to a tactical diagram. "Remember your training. Never turn with a Zero. Use your altitude advantage. Use your speed. Use your firepower. Boom and zoom. Dive, shoot, climb. Don't try to dogfight. Don't try to outturn them. You can't. They're lighter, more maneuverable. But we're faster. We're more powerful. We're better armed. We're better protected." He paused. "If a Zero tries to climb away from you, follow him up. This is important. The Zero used to own the vertical, not anymore. The Hellcat can match them. Above 14,000 feet, we can beat them. So when they try their signature move, the vertical climbing loop, follow them up. Watch them stall out, then kill them." Ashford took notes, memorized every word. This was the encounter he had been training for. The moment when theory became reality. "Launches at 0800 hours. We'll have 91 Hellcats in the air. The Japanese won't know what hit them." Questions. No one spoke. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we make history." That night, Ashford wrote a letter home, just in case, told his parents he loved them, told them not to worry, told them he was flying the best fighter in the world, told them he would be fine. He hoped it was true. October 5th, 1943, 0730 hours. Brendan Ashford sat in bureau number 0885, engine running, all systems green, ready for launch. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled, his mind focused. Today, he would fight Zeros. Today, he would find out if the Hellcat was everything promised. Today, he would discover if he could kill a man in fair combat. The catapult shot him into the morning air. He formed up on his element leader. Lieutenant Marcus Bennett, 6 victories in Wildcats before transitioning to Hellcats. Good pilot. Steady, reliable. 91 Hellcats climbed toward Wake Island. The formation stretched for miles. The sound of 182 R-2800 engines created thunder that could be heard on the island 30 miles away. At 0815 hours, radar detected Japanese fighters launching. 50 contacts, climbing to intercept. All units bandits climbing, Angels 18, Vector 340. The Hellcats adjusted course. Climbing, positioning for altitude advantage. The basic principle of fighter combat. Get above your enemy, control the vertical, dictate the terms of engagement. At 18,000 feet, Ashford spotted them. Dark specks against the blue. Zeros, climbing in formation. Beautiful aircraft, deadly. But today they would meet their match. The Hellcat formation split. 4 plane divisions. Each division selecting targets. Positioning for attack runs. Ashford followed Bennett down. Diving from 20,000 feet. Building speed. 350 knots. 380 knots. 400 knots. The Hellcat could dive faster than any Japanese aircraft. That was the advantage. Dive fast. Shoot. Zoom, climb away. The Zeros couldn't follow in the dive. Couldn't catch them in the climb. Bennett opened fire on a Zero, missed. The Japanese pilot broke hard left. Evading, Ashford tried to track him. Couldn't. The Zero turned inside the Hellcat's turn radius. Disappeared. Then reappeared. Climbing. Going vertical. This was it. The moment Wade had described. The Zero's signature move. The vertical climbing loop. The tactic that had killed so many Wildcat pilots. Ashford didn't hesitate. Followed him up. The Zero climbed steeply. Ashford matched him. Stick back, throttle forward. The R-2800 roaring, the supercharger whining, the propeller clawing for altitude. 12,000 feet, still with him. 10,000 feet, still climbing. 10,000 feet. The Hellcat was gaining. The supercharger's second stage had kicked in. More power, more climb performance. The Zero was struggling now, approaching its ceiling. 10,000 feet. Both aircraft hung there, nearly stalled, wallowing in thin air. The Zero pilot was looking back. Ashford could see his helmet, his face, his fear. He squeezed the trigger. 650 caliber machine guns opened fire. 80 rounds per second. Armor-piercing incendiary, converging at 300 yards, creating a cone of destruction. The Zero exploded, not caught fire, exploded. The unarmored fuel tank detonating in a fireball. The airframe disintegrating, pieces tumbling toward the ocean. The pilot still strapped in his seat, dead, gone. Ashford had just killed Isamu Tanaka, though he would never know his name, never know he was a 9-victory ace, never know he had a wife named Akiko and a daughter named Yuki, never know anything except that he had destroyed an enemy aircraft in 2.8 seconds. The radio erupted. Splash 10, Ashford got one. Ashford broke right, climbed away, scanning for more threats. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline, shock, the realization of what he had done. He had killed a man, a skilled pilot, a warrior. In less than 3 seconds, the rest of the battle blurred. More Hellcats diving, more Zeros evading, more fireballs, more kills. The mathematics were one-sided, 91 Hellcats versus 50 Zeros. American aircraft flown by well-trained pilots with hundreds of hours. Japanese aircraft flown by veterans, yes, but veterans flying obsolete tactics against superior equipment. By 0900 hours it was over. 28 Zeros destroyed, 2 Hellcats lost, a 14-to-1 kill ratio. The radio intercepts told the Japanese story, panicked voices, confused reports. American fighters climbing like Zeros. How is this possible? Cannot shake them, cannot climb away. Request instructions, they're destroying us. Those intercepted transmissions would be studied for decades. The moment when Japanese pilots realized their advantage was gone. When they understood that American engineering had caught up, had exceeded, had built something unstoppable. Ashford landed aboard Essex at 0945 hours. His fuel gauge showed 20 minutes remaining. His ammunition counter showed 1,800 rounds remaining. He had fired 600 rounds, killed 1 Zero, used 1/4 of his ammunition to completely eliminate an enemy ace. The plane captain helped him out of the cockpit. "Sir, we heard you got one, your first aerial kill." "Yeah, I got one." "Congratulations, sir. That's incredible." Ashford nodded, couldn't speak. His legs felt weak. His hands were still shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off. The reality was setting in. He had killed a man, face to face in fair combat. The man had been trying to kill him, but still, dead because Ashford pulled a trigger, dead because American engineers built a better aircraft, dead because the Zero's advantages were gone. Commander Wade found him in the ready room. "Good kill, Ashford. Clean, professional, exactly how we trained you." "Thank you, sir. How do you feel?" Ashford considered lying, considered saying he felt great, felt proud, felt victorious. Instead, he told the truth. "I feel sick, sir. I just killed a man. Burned him alive. He was trying to kill me, I know. But still, he's dead. His family will never see him again. Because of me." Wade sat down, long silence. "That feeling is normal. Means you're human. Means you understand what you did. Some pilots don't feel it. They're the ones I worry about. But Ashford, that feeling has to stay in this room. When you climb back into that cockpit, you have to be cold, professional, efficient, because the next Zero pilot won't hesitate, won't feel guilty, won't care about your family. He'll just try to kill you." "Yes, sir. You did your job today. You survived. You killed an enemy who was trying to kill you. That's war. That's all war is. Don't apologize for it. Don't feel guilty about it. Just do your job and come home." Wade stood, walked away, left Ashford alone with his thoughts. That night, Ashford dreamed about the Zero pilot, saw his face through the canopy, saw the moment of realization, the moment when he understood he was going to die, saw the fireball, saw the debris falling. He woke up sweating, couldn't go back to sleep, just lay there thinking about a man whose name he would never know. A man who died because Ashford followed him up, because the Hellcat could do what the Wildcat couldn't, because the war had changed. The reports reaching Tokyo were grim. Intelligence officers compiled pilot testimonies, analyzed radio intercepts, studied gun camera footage salvaged from crashed aircraft. The assessment was unanimous. Disturbing, potentially catastrophic. The Americans had deployed a new fighter, larger than the Wildcat, more powerful, better armed, better protected, and most critically, it could climb with the Zero. The vertical advantage was gone. Japanese naval aviation had built its entire tactical doctrine around the Zero's superior climb performance. When American fighters attacked, Zeros climbed away, pulled vertical, let the Americans stall and fall, then dove on them and destroyed them. That tactic no longer worked. At Wake Island on October 5th, Zeros had tried to climb away from American fighters. The American fighters followed them up, matched their climb rate, exceeded it above 14,000 feet, then destroyed them at the apex of the climb when Japanese pilots were most vulnerable. The reports included estimates of the new American fighters' performance: maximum speed approximately 380 miles per hour, service ceiling approximately 37,000 feet, rate of climb equal to or exceeding the A6M at altitudes above 14,000 feet. Armament: 6 heavy machine guns believed to be 12.7 millimeter caliber. Ammunition load sufficient for extended combat. Most disturbing armor protection that made the aircraft nearly impossible to destroy with 7.7 millimeter or even 20 millimeter weapons. Multiple Zeros had pumped dozens of rounds into American fighters only to watch them fly away. Damaged, leaking, but flying. The Zero could not sustain damage. 3 or 4 50 caliber rounds in the right place and the Zero burned. The entire tactical exchange was asymmetric. Japanese pilots had to achieve perfect hits to kill Americans. American pilots just had to hit anywhere. The psychological impact was immediate. Japanese pilot morale began to crack. Stories spread through the squadrons. The new American fighter that couldn't be killed. That climbed like a Zero but hit like a bomber. That brought pilots home no matter how many hits it took. They called it different names: the Gray Ghost, the Demon, the Unstoppable One. Its official designation was F6F Hellcat, and it was just getting started. November 11, 1943, Rabaul Task Force 38 launched the largest carrier strike yet against the Japanese stronghold. Rabaul was the key to Japanese control of the Solomons. A massive base, hundreds of aircraft, thousands of troops, fortifications. The Americans needed it neutralized. 97 Hellcats escorted the strike. They expected heavy opposition. They got it. Over 100 Japanese fighters rose to meet them. Zeros mostly. Some Oscars, a few Tonys, everything the Japanese could put in the air. The battle lasted 3 hours. Multiple engagements, swirling dogfights, individual combats scattered across 100 square miles. The sky filled with aircraft, tracers, explosions, falling debris. Brendan Ashford shot down 2 Zeros that day, his second and third kills. Both vertical engagements. Both times following Japanese pilots up. Both times watching them die when they couldn't believe an American fighter had matched their climb. 1 Zero pilot bailed out. Ashford watched the parachute deploy, watched the pilot descend toward the ocean, hoped he would be rescued, knew he probably wouldn't. By day's end, the accounting was brutal. 47 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 8 American aircraft lost. Not all Hellcats, some Dauntlesses, some Avengers. But the fighter losses were minimal. The Japanese couldn't sustain this, couldn't replace aircraft and pilots fast enough. The attrition was killing them. November 23, 1943, Tarawa, the Gilbert Islands campaign, American forces invading, Japanese forces defending, the carrier task force providing air cover, Hellcats flying combat air patrol, protecting the fleet, protecting the invasion force. The Japanese launched a strike. 30 bombers, 20 Zero escorts, trying to hit the carriers, trying to stop the invasion. They never got through. 56 Hellcats intercepted them 60 miles from the fleet. The slaughter was clinical, professional, devastating. Ashford shot down 1 bomber and 1 Zero, his 4th and 5th kills. He was an ace now. 5 victories, the threshold that separated regular pilots from legends. He didn't feel legendary. He felt tired, worn down by months of combat, by the constant stress, by the knowledge that every mission might be his last. But he kept flying, kept fighting, kept killing, because that was the drum, because men were depending on him, because the war had to be won. The final count at Tarawa: 30 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 1 Hellcat lost, a 30-to-1 kill ratio that shocked even the American commanders. The Hellcat was doing exactly what Commander Hawthorne Callaway had envisioned, bringing pilots home, destroying enemy aircraft, winning the air war. But Callaway would never see it. November 26, 1943, night mission over the Gilberts. Commander Hawthorne Callaway flew his F6F into the darkness. Night combat air patrol, protecting the fleet from Japanese torpedo bombers. Dangerous work, difficult navigation, easy to get disoriented, easy to make mistakes. At 2145 hours, radar detected bogies inbound. Japanese aircraft, possibly torpedo bombers. Callaway vectored to intercept. He found them at 8,000 feet, 2 aircraft, but in the darkness, identification was nearly impossible. Friend or foe, American or Japanese. The question that could mean life or death. Callaway closed to visual range. Tried to identify. Couldn't. Fired a recognition flare. No response. Then tracers reached out, or not from the aircraft in front of him. From above. Behind. A TBF Avenger, American torpedo bomber. Its rear gunner had seen an aircraft approach in the darkness. Couldn't identify it. Made a split-second decision. Fired. 50 caliber rounds tore through Callaway's Hellcat, punched through the armor plate, through the pilot, through the instrument panel. Callaway's aircraft nosed over, dove into the ocean, impact at 300 miles per hour, disintegration on contact. Nothing recovered except some floating debris. The man who had demanded Grumman build a fighter that brought pilots home died at sea, killed by friendly fire, by a frightened gunner, by the chaos and confusion of night combat. The irony was crushing. Callaway had catalyzed the Hellcat's creation, had pushed for survivability, had saved thousands of American lives by insisting on armor and self-sealing tanks and robust design. And he died anyway, not from enemy action, from a mistake, a random chance, a moment of confusion. The Navy buried him at sea, posthumously promoted to captain, recommended for another medal, but no medal could change the fact that he was dead at 33, that his wife was a widow, that his 2 children would grow up without a father, that the aircraft he created would dominate the war he didn't survive to see end. Brendan Ashford attended the memorial service aboard Essex, stood with 200 other officers and men, listened to the chaplain speak about sacrifice and duty and honor, felt angry, felt cheated, felt the unfairness of it all. Callaway had created the Hellcat, had made it possible for pilots like Ashford to survive, to fight, to win, and now he was gone, killed by his own side, lost to the war just when his creation was proving its worth. Ashford wanted to thank him, wanted to tell him the Hellcat was everything promised, that it brought pilots home, that it was beating the zero, that his vision had changed the war. But he never got the chance. Later, much later, Chicago would name its major airport after Commander Hawthorne Callaway. O'Hare International Airport. Millions of passengers passing through every year, most never knowing the name's origin, never knowing the man who died trying to bring pilots home. His legacy lived in an airport few connected to him, and in a fighter that dominated a war he didn't survive to see end. December 1943 through May 1944. The buildup. The Hellcat proved itself again and again. Strikes against Truk, against the Marianas, against Palau. Everywhere American carriers went, Hellcats flew. Everywhere Hellcats flew, Japanese aircraft died. The kill ratios remained obscene, 10-to-1, 15-to-1, 20-to-1. The Japanese couldn't compete, couldn't adapt, couldn't build a counter. They tried. Rushed the A6M5 into production. Slightly more powerful engine, slightly better dive speed. Still no armor, still no self-sealing tanks. Still fundamentally the same aircraft that had dominated in 1942 but was obsolete by 1944. They developed the J2M Raiden, the N1K Scheiden, new fighters with more power, more speed, more firepower. But by the time these aircraft reached frontline squadrons in meaningful numbers, it was too late. American numerical superiority was overwhelming. American pilot training was superior. American tactics were refined. The infrastructure of defeat was already in place. Japanese pilot training collapsed under the pressure. Before the war, Japanese naval aviators trained for 2 years, received over 600 hours of flight time before their first combat mission. By 1944, training time had been cut to 6 months, less than 100 hours total flight time. Pilots were being rushed through inadequate training and sent to fight American pilots who had 400-plus hours. The disparity was catastrophic. Brendan Ashford flew his 50th combat mission in April 1944. A strike against Truk, 7 months after his first kill, 7 months of constant combat. He had shot down 7 Japanese aircraft total, 2 at Rabaul, 2 at Tarawa, 1 at Truk, 1 at Kwajalein, 1 at Eniwetok. 7 victories, not spectacular, not historic, just competent, professional, surviving. His Hellcat Bureau number 08815 had been hit 14 times, 7.7mm rounds mostly, a few 20mm impacts. None penetrated the armor, none caused serious damage. The self-sealing fuel tanks worked as advertised. The rugged airframe absorbed punishment and kept flying. The Hellcat had brought him home 50 times, 50 combat missions, 50 times climbing into the cockpit knowing this might be the day he died, 50 times landing safely, 50 times thanking whatever gods watched over fighter pilots. By June 1944, Essex was part of Task Force 58, 15 carriers, 900 aircraft, the largest concentration of naval air power ever assembled, steaming toward the Mariana Islands, toward the decisive battle that would break Japanese naval aviation forever. The stage was set for the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, June 19, 1944. The Philippine Sea. The water was impossibly blue, the sky impossibly clear, perfect conditions for the largest carrier battle in history, 15 American fleet carriers, 900 aircraft, facing 5 Japanese fleet carriers and 4 light carriers, 430 aircraft. The numbers favored the Americans, but numbers weren't everything. The Japanese still had veteran pilots, still had competent commanders, still had the warrior spirit that had carried them through 3 years of war. What they didn't have was competitive aircraft, competitive tactics, competitive training, competitive logistics. The infrastructure of victory had shifted completely to the American side. At 1,000 hours, radar aboard USS Lexington detected the first Japanese strike inbound. 69 aircraft in the first wave, range 150 miles and closing. Commander Charles Brewer, fighter director officer aboard Lexington, studied the radar plot and made his call. Vector all Hellcats to intercept, bearing 265, Angels 20, distance 55 miles. 220 F6F Hellcats launched or were already airborne. They climbed to 20,000 feet, positioned themselves between the Japanese formation and the American fleet, then waited. Lieutenant Garrett Brennan led his division of 4 Hellcats, already 12 victories, 29 years old, calm, professional, deadly. He had transitioned from Wildcats to Hellcats in January 1943, had flown both types in combat, knew exactly how much better the Hellcat was, how much safer, how much more capable. All units bandits at 12 o'clock slightly below, Judy dive bombers with 0 escort. We take the bombers first. Brennan's division rolled into the attack, diving from 20,000 feet, building speed. The Hellcat's dive performance was phenomenal. Clean, stable, fast. Over 400 miles per hour with throttle reduced. The Judy dive bombers below were making 220 miles per hour. Sitting ducks, Brennan positioned himself 400 yards behind the first Judy, reduced closure speed, stabilized, put the gunsight pipper on the bomber's engine, squeezed the trigger, 1 second burst, 60 rounds, half going into the Judy's left engine. The engine exploded, fire erupted, the bomber nosed over, dove toward the ocean trailing smoke and flame. Brennan shifted targets. Second Judy, 300 yards, another 1 second burst. Another explosion, another kill. Third Judy, fourth, fifth, sixth. In 8 minutes, Garrett Brennan shot down 6 Japanese dive bombers, used 360 rounds of ammunition, 60 rounds per kill, 97.5% ammunition efficiency. The mathematics were clinical. Perfect. Deadly. His wingman got 3. His second element got 4 more. 1 division. 13 enemy aircraft destroyed. No American losses. The entire first wave suffered similar devastation. 69 aircraft launched. 42 destroyed, and 27 got through to attack the fleet. None scored significant hits. Brennan landed aboard Lexington at 11:45 hours, climbed out of his cockpit, looked up at the bridge. Admiral Mark Mitcher was watching. Brennan held up 6 fingers, grinning. The ship's photographer captured the moment. Garrett Brennan, fresh-faced, confident, the embodiment of American air superiority, 6 kills, 8 minutes, history. That photograph would become iconic. Reprinted in newspapers, used in training materials, shown to new pilots as proof that the Hellcat worked, that American tactics worked, that victory was achievable. But the Japanese weren't done yet. The second wave launched at 1100 hours, 128 aircraft, more bombers, more zeros, desperate to get through, desperate to hit the carriers, desperate to change the outcome. They didn't. Hellcats intercepted them 50 miles from the fleet. The slaughter was worse than the first wave. American pilots had refined their tactics, had confidence, had momentum. The Japanese formations broke under the assault. Individual aircraft scattered, trying to evade, trying to survive, trying to reach the fleet. Over 100 aircraft from the second wave were destroyed. Fewer than 20 got through. Again, no significant hits. Brendan Ashford flew in the second wave interception. He shot down 2 zeros, his 8th and 9th kills. Both engagements were vertical. Both times following Japanese pilots up. Both times watching them die at the apex of their climb when they discovered the Hellcat could still match them. 1-0 pilot bailed out. Ashford watched him descend. 19 years old maybe, couldn't have been much older. Kid, just a kid sent to die by old men in Tokyo who didn't care about his life. Ashford felt sick, kept flying, kept fighting, because that was the job. The third and fourth waves suffered similar fates. Total Japanese aircraft losses for the day, 315 destroyed out of 430 that participated. 73% loss rate. Unsustainable, catastrophic. The end of Japanese carrier aviation as an effective fighting force. American losses 29 aircraft total, fewer than 20 in air-to-air combat. The rest to anti-aircraft fire or operational accidents. The kill ratio 19-1. 19 Japanese aircraft destroyed for every American aircraft lost in air combat. The number would stand as the highest kill ratio ever achieved in a major air battle. Never matched, never exceeded the high watermark of air superiority. Navy pilots immediately nicknamed the battle the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. One pilot's comment captured the one-sided nature perfectly. Hell, it was just like an old-time turkey shoot back home. They just kept coming. We just kept shooting them down. The Japanese pilots who survived reported back in shock. Broken, traumatized. Their combat reports made for grim reading. The American fighters came in formations we could not break. They climbed with us. They dove away when we tried to turn with them. Their guns, when they fired, destroyed our aircraft instantly. We had no answer, no tactic that worked. We could only die. Another pilot wrote simply, "The Americans have built what we cannot match. The war is lost." He was right. The Battle of the Philippine Sea continued the next day. American carriers launched strikes against the Japanese fleet, found them retreating, sank 3 carriers. Zuikaku, the last survivor of Pearl Harbor, the carrier that had somehow made it through Coral Sea midway Santa Cruz. Her luck ran out at 14:20 hours on June 20th. 7 bombs, 4 torpedoes. She capsized and sank, taking 842 men with her. Zuiho, Chitos, also sunk. The Japanese carrier force was effectively destroyed. What remained were empty hulls with no aircraft, no pilots, no capability. Japanese naval aviation had been broken, shattered, eliminated as a strategic threat. The Hellcat had made it possible. Summer and fall of 19 the endgame. F6F Hellcats roamed the Pacific at will. They escorted B-29 bombers to Japan. They supported amphibious landings from the Marianas to the Philippines. They destroyed Japanese air power on the ground and in the air. By October 1944, Japanese naval aviation had been reduced to a shadow. The elite carrier pilots who had attacked Pearl Harbor were dead. The replacements were undertrained teenagers flying obsolete aircraft against superior enemies. The final humiliation came during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. October 23-26, 1944. Japanese carriers stripped of most of their aircraft served as decoys to lure American carriers away from the landing beaches. The plan was desperate, suicidal, but it was all they had left. Hellcats from Task Force 38 found them off Cape Engano. 4 carriers, minimal air defense, sitting ducks. The strikes went in, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, Hellcats strafing. The Japanese carriers didn't stand a chance. By day's end, all 4 were sinking or sunk. The few aircraft they carried were swept from the sky. Lieutenant Garrett Brennan flew in those strikes, added 3 more kills to his total. 19 victories now, second highest scoring Hellcat pilot in the Navy, behind only Commander Declan Thorne with 34. Brendan Ashford also flew at Leyte Gulf, shot down 1 more zero, his 10th kill, double ace, still alive, still flying Bureau number 08815, the same Hellcat he had received in January 1943, the same aircraft that had brought him home through 22 months of war. The aircraft had taken hits. 63 bullet impacts, mostly 7.7 millimeters, a few 20 millimeter. None had penetrated the critical areas. The armor worked. The self-sealing tanks worked. The robust airframe worked. Everything Callaway had demanded. Everything Grumman had delivered. By November 1944, the air war had become a slaughter. Japanese aircraft still appeared, still attacked, but in smaller numbers, with less skill, using tactics that no longer worked. The kill ratios climbed higher, 30 to 1, 40 to 1, on some days worse. The Japanese introduction of kamikaze tactics in October 1944 was tacit admission of failure. Suicide attacks, one-way missions. Pilots trained just enough to take off and find a target. Not enough to fight, not enough to survive. The kamikaze attacks were terrifying, effective sometimes, but strategically useless. Trading trained pilots for minor damage wasn't victory. It was desperation. It was the death rattle of a dying air force. The Hellcat proved effective against kamikazes. Combat air patrol stations were established. Radar-directed interceptions. Hellcats shot down kamikaze aircraft before they reached the fleet. Not always. Some got through, but most didn't. The protective umbrella held. December 1944 through June 1945. The final months. The war moved closer to Japan. American forces invaded Iwo Jima, then Okinawa, each invasion supported by carrier task forces, each task force protected by Hellcats. The routine was established. Effective, unstoppable. Brendan Ashford flew his 73rd and final combat mission on June 15, 1945. A strike against Osaka. His Hellcat took 3 hits from anti-aircraft fire. One shell punched through his left wing. Another shattered his portside landing light. A third struck the armor plate behind his seat. That third shell would have killed him, would have gone through his spine, would have made him another casualty, another name on a list, another telegram to his parents. But the armor plate stopped it, 3/4 of an inch of penetration, then stopped cold. The plate deformed, cracked, but held. Did its job, saved his life. Ashford landed aboard Essex with 12 minutes of fuel remaining, climbed out, touched the armor plate, felt the deformed metal, thought about Commander Callaway, the man who had demanded this armor, who had insisted on survivability, who had saved Ashford's life from beyond the grave. He wished he could thank him, could tell him the armor worked, that the Hellcat worked, that pilots were coming home. But Callaway was dead, resting somewhere at the bottom of the Pacific, never knowing what his creation accomplished, never seeing the war end, never receiving the gratitude of the thousands of pilots his vision saved. August 15, 1945. Japan surrendered. The war was over. Brendan Ashford stood on the flight deck of Essex in Tokyo Bay. Around him, hundreds of ships, American, British, Australian. The combined might of the Allied fleet assembled to accept Japan's capitulation. Above him, formations of Hellcats and Corsairs flying victory circles. He was alive, against all odds, against all probability. He had flown 73 combat missions, had shot down 10 enemy aircraft, had been shot at hundreds of times, had watched friends die, had killed men, had survived. His final tally, 10 victories, 73 missions, 0 forced landings, 0 mechanical failures, 1 aircraft. Bureau number 08815, the same Hellcat that had brought him through 32 months of war. He would never fly her again. The war was over. They would go home. The Hellcat would be scrapped or sold or put in storage, melted down, turned into cars or refrigerators or suburban houses. But he would remember the smell of hydraulic fluid, the sound of the R-2800 at full power, the vibration of 650 caliber machine guns, the sight of Zeros tumbling toward the ocean, the relief of seeing the carrier deck after a long mission. All of it. The final accounting was compiled by Naval Intelligence in late 1945. Every combat action report, every gun camera film, every pilot debrief, every witness statement, they correlated, they verified, they eliminated duplicates. The numbers were staggering. F6F Hellcats had destroyed 156 enemy aircraft in aerial combat, 75% of all United States Navy aerial victories in World War II. Add to that hundreds more aircraft destroyed on the ground, thousands of ground targets destroyed in ground attack missions. Against this devastation, 270 Hellcats had been lost to enemy aircraft in aerial combat. The kill-to-loss ratio, 19.1 to 1. 19.1 enemy aircraft destroyed for every Hellcat lost. 307 Navy and Marine Corps pilots had become aces flying the Hellcat, more than any other American aircraft. The Hellcat was an ace maker. A pilot could transition into the aircraft with minimal experience and achieve success. The Hellcat forgave mistakes, protected pilots, gave them advantages, made victory possible. Production totaled 275 aircraft, built in just over 2 years. An average of 17 aircraft per day at peak production. American industrial might made manifest. But behind the statistics were stories, human stories, of men who flew and fought and killed and died, of pilots who came home changed, of families that never saw their sons again. Commander Declan Thorne finished the war with 34 confirmed victories. The Navy's top ace, the killer of killers. He could have lectured, could have written books, could have made a career out of his combat record. He chose not to. After the war, he became a commercial airline pilot, flying passengers across the Pacific, following routes that sometimes passed near where he had fought, where he had killed, where friends had died. He flew for 30 years, never had an accident, never lost a passenger. He never talked about the war unless directly asked. And when asked, his answers were brief. I did what needed to be done. The Hellcat made it possible. I was lucky. Many weren't. That was all he would say. He died in 2001, 88 years old, surrounded by family. His family only learned the full extent of his combat record at his funeral. They were shocked. He had never mentioned it, never displayed his medals, never talked about being a hero, because he didn't think of himself as one. He thought of himself as a man who survived when others hadn't, who killed when necessary, who came home when 34 enemy pilots didn't. Lieutenant Garrett Brennan became an instructor at the Navy Fighter Weapons School after the war, teaching the next generation how to fight, how to survive, how to use the Hellcat's advantages. He never claimed to be special, never wrote a memoir, just taught, just passed on the lessons purchased with blood. He flew until 1968, 23 years of service, retired as a commander, moved to San Diego, watched the jets replace the propeller fighters, watched the Hellcat become history. He died in 94, 72 years old. Heart attack. His obituary mentioned his service, mentioned his 19 victories, didn't mention the nightmares, the survivor's guilt, the weight of 19 men killed. His family found his flight logs in a box in the garage. Every mission recorded, every kill noted. No commentary, no reflection, just dates and times and brief tactical notes. Professional, clinical, the way he needed it to be. 1947. Brendan Ashford left the Navy, 26 years old, looking 40. He had done his duty, paid his debt, earned his peace. Time to find a life that didn't involve killing. He settled in Oregon, small town, quiet, mountains and forests, found work as a flight instructor, teaching veterans how to fly civilian aircraft. Safe aircraft, slow aircraft, aircraft that didn't carry guns. He married in 1949. Sarah, school teacher, patient, understanding, knew about the war but didn't ask many questions. They had 3 children. He taught them to appreciate the quiet, never taught them about the war, never told them about the 10 men he had killed. Some things couldn't be explained, could only be carried alone. 1965. Brendan Ashford drove to the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. 44 years old now, gray in his hair, a successful businessman, a good father, a man who had built a peaceful life. But the war followed him, in dreams, in memories, in the sound of radial engines overhead. The museum had a restored F6F Hellcat on display. Not his aircraft, but close enough. Same paint scheme, same markings. He stood before it for a long time. His hand touched the wing root. Cool metal. The same place he had touched 22 years ago. The memories flooded back. A museum docent approached. Beautiful aircraft, isn't it? This particular Hellcat shot down 12 enemy planes during the war. Ashford nodded. Did you serve in the war, sir? I did. What did you fly? Ashford pointed at the Hellcat. One of these. How many kills did you get? 10. That's amazing. You must have some incredible stories. Ashford's hand touched the fuselage one more time. The only story that matters is this aircraft brought me home. 73 missions. Every time. That's the story. He walked away. The docent called after him about an oral history project. Ashford declined. He had no interest in reliving those years. No interest in being remembered as a killer. He just wanted to be left alone with his memories. That night, he called his wife, talked for an hour about nothing important, about the kids, about plans for next week, normal things, safe things. When he hung up, he felt better. Not good, but better. Good enough. Across the Pacific in a small apartment in Tokyo, an old woman lit incense before a photograph. Flight Warrant Officer Isamu Tanaka, 28 years old forever. Uniform crisp, eyes serious. The photograph taken in early 1943, before October 5th, before Wake Island, before the Hellcat. The woman's name was Yuki, Tanaka's daughter, 62 years old now. She had been 3 when her father died. Didn't remember him. Just the photograph. Just the stories her mother Akiko had told before she died in 1978. Just the empty space where a father should have been. The last thing Isamu Tanaka ever said was his family's names. Akiko, Yuki. His final thought was of them. Not of war, not of victory, not of the emperor. Just love. Just family. Just the people he would never see again. Yuki visited Yasukuni's shrine twice a year, spring and fall, honored her father's memory, prayed for his soul, tried to understand a war she was too young to remember, tried to comprehend why so many had died. She knew how her father died, shot down by an American fighter, over Wake Island on October 5th, 1943. The official record said nothing more, no details, no specifics, just killed in action. She didn't know he had been a 9-victory ace, didn't know he was skilled, didn't know he had perfected a vertical climbing tactic, didn't know he had died because he encountered an aircraft that could match him, an aircraft he didn't know existed. She didn't know the American pilot's name, didn't know Brendan Ashford was also 22 years old, didn't know he was terrified, didn't know he still had nightmares about that day, didn't know he wished he could apologize to her, to tell her he was sorry, that he didn't hate her father, that war forced them into opposition, that under different circumstances they might have been friends. History had moved on. Japan had rebuilt. The war was 75 years in the past. Ancient history, another era, another world. But for Yuki, it was yesterday. Always yesterday. The day her father went to war and never came home. She placed fresh flowers beside the photograph, bowed, whispered